probably already know that colostrum is the first step in starting calves off right. But what are the other factors that come into play? Welcome to Beyond Colostrum, the show where we'll talk about how to optimize your calves with science and research that goes beyond just colostrum. We'll challenge the ways you typically manage your calves, and you might learn some new concepts beyond what you're already used to. Thanks for joining us as we go beyond colostrum.
Welcome to Beyond Colostrum, the podcast where we go deeper into colostrum management to define what is exceptional colostrum, how to give every calf their best start, and the science behind it all. I'm your host, Sydney Fortier, and today we're pulling back the curtain on something that matters more than anything else when it comes to colostrum products: quality assurance. How do we ensure safety? How do we guarantee consistency from batch to batch? And what really separates a good product from the very best? To help us answer those questions, I'm joined by two experts who live and breathe quality every day: Ron Sargent, Director of Quality Assurance, and Chantelle Gosselin, Quality Assurance Laboratory Manager. Together, they'll walk us through the rigorous processes, testing protocols, and uncompromising standards that go into every product, and why that commitment makes all the difference. If you've ever wondered what happens behind the scenes to ensure you're getting a product you can trust, this is the conversation you won't want to miss. Let's go beyond colostrum.
Thank you again, Ron and Chantelle, for joining me this afternoon. Do you mind getting into a little bit about who you are and your background and what you do for SCCL every single day? Chantelle, we could start with you.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. So I guess a little bit about my background. I have a biotechnology diploma from SciAst here in Saskatoon. That's a 2-year program. It's heavily based with laboratory skills. So that is really what I do best. It's very funny because at the end of your program, you get to choose a practicum. And the practicum that I wanted was actually the Saskatoon Colostrum Company. I thought it sounded really interesting, but at the time, it was such a small company. It was everybody's second job. So I unfortunately didn't have the opportunity at that time to do my practicum with them. But it's really funny how I kind of ended up here. My very first job that I got after school was in the immunology lab at WCVM on the university campus, which is the lab that actually Debbie originally ran. Ron, of course, worked there as well. And so it really just kind of tied in nicely. I then started with the Saskatoon Colostrum Company after my term position was done at the immunology lab there. So it was really neat that I kind of found my way there. So, day to day, as you said, I am the quality assurance lab manager. So I just oversee the day-to-day events throughout the lab, deal with managing the people, make sure that the flow is working properly, everything's running smoothly, the tests are all up to par, and everyone's kind of, I guess, just doing what they need to do to the quality they need to be performing that at. I also, along with lab manager, I'm HACCP coordinator here at SCCL. And what that kind of entails is that I look at the processing documents, making sure that they are all within spec. If not, deviation reports get written up. It's just really helping Ron oversee the food safety management system here. And it's a very important part of the process. So that's what I do.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really crazy that you really had a full circle moment with SCCL, starting just wanting to work with us so bad. And now we've had you for quite a bit of time now.
20 years, yeah.
Congrats. So you set Ron up pretty well. A little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Ron Sargent. I'm the Director of Quality Assurance for SCCL. I grew up in northwestern Saskatchewan and moved to Saskatoon right after high school. I have a background in biological sciences, much like Chantelle. And I've been with SCCL for 29 and a half years now. When I started out, I wore a lot of different hats, processing, manufacturing, packaging, things like that. QA, of course. Just now I'm focused on QA and all the regulatory and labels and compliances and such that go along with that. Quite a bit of interaction with veterinarians and producers and researchers that we deal with. So a lot of paper shuffling, a lot of got my fingers in a lot of little different areas. So.
Yeah, being with SCCL for so long, you must have really seen kind of like how it's grown over the years.
I would have never thought when I started with this company, basically we were 4 science nerds that started out. We had no business sense whatsoever. We literally were a kiddie pool and yard type company. We borrowed or leased or rented or stole equipment and space, etc. And now we're basically a standalone facility here that we have control of our own destiny here. So, in the early days, there was a lot of touch and go things. BSE broke out. We thought that might be the end of our business there, but in the end, people still need to eat beef and drink milk. So we went through that. And it's just amazing how for several years, we've basically doubled in size year to year, which is just amazing to see that growth. And the people here, just the knowledge base and the experience that we've got here. We've got employees more than just a few that have 15, 20 years experience here. So just the experience and knowledge here is amazing.
And for such a small team to be able to like reach so many corners of the world and help out so many calves, it's really cool. It's a really cool place and team to be a part of. But given that, now that we know a little bit more about you guys and what you do, and again, how amazing SCCL is, let's address some of the concerns that people may have when it comes to colostrum. So we have quality assurance for a reason. We're dealing with biological products and everything like that. And so there's the level of biosecurity that is super important. So some things that we hear in industry when it comes to powdered colostrum, really the biggest concern that we receive from producers is potential disease risk. So when we are recommending for producers to not feed raw or pasteurized colostrum from cattle from neighboring farms or the neighboring dairy farm or dad's farm down the street because of things like iones or other diseases of the like that can pass from animal to animal, from farm to farm, how are we getting away with feeding a powdered colostrum? Is this a potential disease risk? Is this a concern when we're feeding the product?
No, not at all. In fact, our process, we validated our heat treatment parameters of the colostrum to make it safe. We validated that using live organism, the Mycobacterium paratuberculosis avium, which is it's the causative organism of iones, MAP, as it's commonly referred to. And so we seeded colostrum with that organism and showed that our process inactivates it. So you're not going to get iones, you're not going to transmit iones to your herd, and you're not going to. There's no viable pathogens in there. There's no E. coli, salmonella, all those nasty bugs. So there's still bacteria in the powder. It's not sterile. It would be difficult, if not impossible, to get it sterile without some other process that would also damage the antibodies and bioactives like irradiation or things like that. But bugs that are left in there aren't going to harm a calf. And in 30 plus years of manufacturing, we're not aware of causing any disease in calves from our products. And that's literally millions of calves being fed.
So I would just add on to that and say, we do have a lot of standard operating procedures in place here. Actually, rigorous cleaning, movement and attire procedures, so we can ensure that we don't have cross-contamination from our raw product side to our post-processing side. Along with that, we also test every cereal that comes out of the dryer. We send it for micro testing before it gets packaged. And then we also test the final filled package for microbiological content as well, so that we can ensure that it's safe to go out to the farms.
So we can confidently say that there's no disease risk to feeding SCCL colostrum. Mm-hmm. And we have the processes in place every single day and look at it every single day and make sure that it's still up to code and up to standards.
Yeah, we have a lot of safeguards in place because it's really in everyone's best interest to not be transmitting any disease in colostrum. You're feeding it to an animal that has an undeveloped or an immature immune system. So that's again why we'll get into that, but that's why we're often classed as in the same category as vaccines, which are injectable. But it's because we're administering this to an immune naive animal.
So part of the process would be testing and making sure that all of this is still up to standard. So why is it so critical that we test and we continue to test?
Well, I would just say we are highly regulated by many different entities. First off being CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, as well as USDA in the US. We also are regulated and audited. I shouldn't say regulated because they're not a regulatory agency, but audited by GMP Plus International, which takes care of overseas. Along with that, we are GMP Plus HACCP. We are halal. We get audited by Safe Food for Canadians. And many, many client audits as well. So we actually have, I would say, minimum 4 to 8 audits annually. Ron and I are both part of the auditing team, along with a couple of our coworkers here. And they look at all of our processes, all of our traceability, the cleanliness around the facility, our documentation. It's just very extensive. And so it's very helpful to know that we've had no major issues. Sometimes they don't find anything, which is nice. So yeah, we're highly regulated, and we have people that we have to be accountable to, not just the client and the calves themselves, but to regulatory agencies as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Chantelle mentioned, we're audited by Safe Food for Canadians, and that's because some of our product goes into the human use market. So we hold ourselves, or we're held to some pretty high standards because it's all the same process that we make the calf, lamb and kid products for, that we make the human product as well.
Yeah, we're human food grade. And you made mention of this a little bit ago in one of your previous responses, Ron, but we're also in the same class of as vaccines, which means we are a veterinary biological. And because we're talking about regulatory and stuff, I feel like this plays in really well to all of this. So what does it mean to be a veterinary biologic and have that classification?
Well, it means if we're not a veterinary biologic, then there are some markets or some countries where you can be sold as a feed or a nutritional supplement, and the standards and the regulations are much lower for those categories. So we're an antibody product. There's bioactive molecules in there, so they're basically treated as live molecules. So then just the regulatory steps and the checks and the tests and the safeguards are many levels higher than just as a feed.
And Chantelle, you mentioned that this involves a lot of oversight and a lot of regulation, and we just knock those out of the park, obviously, right? But how does this regulation from some like more federal agencies like the CFIA and the USDA, in order to have our biological classification for that specific colostrum products, how does that influence our manufacturing standards, and why is this oversight so important?
I would say because we are so highly regulated and the standard is so high, it just means that we have bars to set. We're required to do so much testing, but I believe that we go beyond what's required for the testing. We have multiple steps where we test our product, both IgG and microbiological content, where we're not required to. That's just so that we can ensure that our product is safe at every step.
As being a licensed veterinary biologic, we have to demonstrate to the governing bodies like the CFIA and the USDA that through feeding trials, actual field studies, feeding our products will aid in the treatment of disease. In this case, it's failure of passive transfer. If you've got just a feed product that is colostrum, but not a licensed veterinary biologic, you don't have to prove anything to the regulators that your product is effective in treating failure of passive transfer. And you'll see that those claims aren't made on the label because they can't make that claim.
How do we test our colostrum for IgG to maintain consistency between batches and products?
So we use a test called the RAD. It's radial immunodiffusion. We did not create it, but we did optimize it for our use. The RAD is, to put it simply, antisera is mixed in with an agarose gel that solidifies. We punch holes in that where we add the sample, the colostrum sample, to be tested to the well. It diffuses through the gel and it forms a lattice with the antisera that's within the gel. That binding creates what we call a precipitin ring, and we read the diameter of that ring. On the plate, we put serum standard of a known concentration. We create a standard curve to which all of these sample diameters are measured against, and that's how we determine the concentration of each sample or each cereal within the RAD. And we need to have results that obviously meet our minimum requirements on our packages to be able to release our product for sale.
Just in brief terms, the RID test, radial immunodiffusion, it measures viable antibodies directly by using an antibody to an antibody, the bovine antibody. So it won't measure any antibodies that are no longer viable.
So through this testing, are you able to also identify like the specific antibody and what that is, protective against, or?
No, it's just specific for
concentration,
immunoglobulin G. And there's two subclasses, heavy and light chains, IgG1 and IgG2. It'll detect both of those. So it's specific. And that's the main immunoglobulin in bovine colostrum is IgG. There's also IgA and IgM. Those are important, but at much smaller amounts, and those aren't generally talked about, but it's just the IgG that's focused on.
I guess one thing to say is for our product, IgG1 and 2, IgG1 is a higher percentage than IgG2, whereas in blood products, you'll often find that IgG1 and 2 is a 50-50 split, whereas IgG1 in colostrum is more like 85% of the components. So.
Yeah, IgG1 gets preferentially secreted in colostrum from from the cow's serum.
So RID would be kind of the gold standard in terms of determining IgG concentration and what's really going on in the colostrum. Is that correct?
As Ron said, the RID reads functional antibody and not just proteins in general. Like the Brix meter would read total dissolved solids and not just functional antibody. So if someone is pasteurizing colostrum on their farm, they could denature the proteins, the IgG in the colostrum, but it'll still pick up on the Brix meter as it's there, but it's not actually functional. The Brix meter is an indirect measurement, whereas the RID is more of a direct way to measure.
So seeing as Brix is the more common tool used on farm, and it is such a quick and handy tool to have, how well does it actually correlate with IgG, like the RID testing that we're seeing in lab compared to if we're Brix testing it?
It's pretty good. Like, I think a lot of studies will show it somewhere around 85% correlation with direct testing, like radial immunodiffusion. So when it comes to colostrum, it's a pretty good indicator on farm, just a quick and easy tool to use for assessing the quality or concentration of antibody in your colostrum, because antibodies are proteins. So the more protein you have in your colostrum, which antibodies or IgG is a big component of that protein, then it's proportional to the quality of your colostrum. There's other proteins in there too, albumin and things like lactose. Those are going to affect the reading, Brix reading as well, but those are going to affect it much less than an increase in immunoglobulins will. Going back to IgG1 versus IgG2, Sydney, the reason IgG1 is maybe held in more favor for colostrum products is because IgG1 is, after ingestion by the calf, it gets resecreted from the circulatory system of the calf onto the mucosal surfaces, like the nasal and lungs, provides local immunity at those sites. Whereas the IgG2 doesn't get resecreted onto the mucosal surfaces. So it's of the two, IgG1 is the better of the two. They're both important, but IgG1 can give more effect, more bang for your buck from IgG1.
Yeah. So IgG2, that's what we would commonly see kind of like circulating in the serum of a adult animal. So would that be what's primarily the IgG component? It would be IgG2 in those serum-based products, as opposed to like a whole bovine.
So in circulating adult serum, there will be approximately 50-50, about equal amounts of IgG1 and IgG2. And then in the colostrum of the cow, though, as she's nearing parturition, her udder will preferentially concentrate IgG1 from her blood, just because IgG1, well, nature evolution has shown that IgG1 is more beneficial to the calf than IgG2. So that's why you get, I'm going to say it's like 85% IgG1 to 15% IgG2 in colostrum. Whereas a serum-based product, dried serum-based, would be more like equal parts IgG1 and IgG2. I think the Brix meters, if you're going to use it, just put out a bit extra money, $400 or $500, and get a little handheld digital refractometer. They're a lot less can go wrong with those than the cheap barrel type optical instruments. It mostly comes down to they work as well, but they're more prone to operator error. So I would go with the digital Brix meters, and they're quite robust. The barrel ones, the cheap ones, you drop them and they can break, whereas the other ones are a little more milk house friendly.
I was at a trade show recently, and I had a gentleman come up to me and say that, oh, well, the bricks isn't really an effective way of measuring IgG because it's measuring the sugar. I can use it to measure maturity of a plant based on like the sugars I'm seeing in it. So is there, I know that Chantelle made mention of it is measuring total solids. And so is sugar a factor? If I just happen to have like a really, really sugar forward colostrum, is that going to influence my bricks reading percentage?
Yeah, it will. The lactose content is much higher in milk than it is in colostrum. So lactose will affect a bricks reading, not so much in the colostrum because the lactose content is much lower. But the person is that you mentioned that said was bricks is just measuring sugar. It does that. Bricks, the principle of it is it's just measuring a light is shine through the sample. And what bricks is it's measuring the amount of diffraction of that light. So the more solids you have, dissolved solids like sugars, dissolved proteins, things like that, the more you have in there, the more that angle of the light gets diffracted or refracted, refractometer. And so it's proportional to how much solid you have in there. So it's not just for colostrum or just for sugar. Basically, the machine is doing the same thing, measurement for everything. It's a matter of applying the correct scale to that instrument. So you can use it in the brewing industry, winemaking, maple syrup, colostrum, a lot of different applications.
At SCCL, are we just testing our colostrum samples, the ones that like come through our door and our product, or what other opportunities for testing and research do we have in our lab?
So I will let Ron speak on research projects, as I don't have a lot of knowledge about those, but we do test a lot of client samples as well, or potential client samples. We used to bring everything here to SCCL until customs became a little bit more sticky with what they were allowing in. So what we decided was to create some satellite labs. We have in the US as well as in the UK, and clients can send their samples there to test for, if it's serum, we test the serum protein and IgG, and if it's colostrum, we test the bricks and IgG there. So that's a program that we started to help education and just started the conversation around colostrum and how RID gives us a more accurate result than bricks. So it just helps farmers get an indication of kind of what's going on in their farm.
Yeah, and on the research side, we continuously, and we have for decades, supported a fair amount of research and academia. And man, a lot of different stuff out there. And a lot of papers published from a lot of trials dealing with how nutrition, how the colostrum quality and quantity, microminerals, macrominerals, temperature, stress. On the calf side, when 30 years ago, colostrum was just given in one feeding to a calf after birth, and basically everyone just walked away from it after that, and it was on its own. And now we've done quite a bit of research to show that feeding a calf what we call post day one colostrum, so that's for 7 to 10 days after birth, is really beneficial in the health of the calf, and the returns down the road are really worth it, and that just mimics the transition milk that a calf would normally get in a natural setting. And also enriching maternal colostrum. If you want to feed your own maternal colostrum to your calves, and many producers do, you suspect that maybe it's not good enough quality or high enough in antibodies as you'd like it to be, then you can mix in some colostrum powder. Multi-species too. Lambs and kids, they just thrive on our products, and those little body masses, they lose heat really quick. So if you have some wet and cold and snowy, windy weather, which is always exactly when lambing or kidding takes place, then they really benefit from not only the antibodies, which are cross-reactive through the species to a lot of them, E. coli and salmonella, things like that, but also the energy they get from the high-fat content in the colostrum. And it's really nice to get the feedback from the goat and sheep producers saying how well their newborns do on our product, and it's really nice to hear that.
Yeah, it's great to be a part of something so much bigger than yourself. It's a huge industry, and we get to service producers and lamb kids and calves, like you've said, and yeah, not only contribute to the industry, but these people who dedicate their lives to livestock and feed the world. So
yeah, it's good to know that we feel we're making a difference.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this 2-part conversation on colostrum quality assurance. Join us for part 2 in 2 weeks' time, where we will discuss the research and practical insights that have come from the Saskatoon Colostrum Company lab for over 32 years. We will explore our process and how we keep our colostrum safe and pathogen-free, the value to producers of testing colostrum and passive transfer, and why SCCL is the practical choice for ruminants everywhere. But until next time, keep your herd thriving with science, nature, and care.
Thank you for listening to Beyond Colostrum, an SCCL podcast. For more insights, resources, and to see our products, visit sccl.com or check the show notes. SCCL has proudly supported producers worldwide for over 30 years, driven by research and innovation. Until next time, keep your herd thriving with science, nature, and care.